Nice to be here. I do not have all the answers. If I had all the answers, I'd be making lots of money somewhere. But no, I don't have all the answers. But I can tell you a little bit about what's going on what's happening in the transition and some of the themes. And as I told Dr. Landrum, just before I've been working on a paper about the liberal arts degrees because we have a big conference coming up at Wake Forest in the spring on how to save the liberal arts. So I do know a little bit about where psychology is going, and I do have training. I'm an economist. Well, I'm a chemist and an economist, but I do have training in psychology and organizational behavior. Before we start, don't ask me anything about football. You'll find out on next September. We have a new quarterback. We have a new offense. We'll have a very good defense. That's all you need to know, okay? And we don't usually win our first game. So anyway, so that's very good for you guys. I want to know what you want. If you're going to walk away in, an hour and a half, hour, I don't know how long your class is. We can go as long as you want to go until they kick us out. Anyway, what do you want to know? What do you want to walk away? What do you want to know? This is not a quiz, so just tell me what you want to know, and I'll try to make sure I cover it, because I'm going to just wing it here. I'm going off some things. So what do you want to know?
I want to know how safe my choice for undergraduate degree is.
How safe your choice is for an undergraduate degree in psychology. What do you mean by safe?
Well, is it a good choice for the job market, or is it something I'm going to have to manicure and
manicure? Okay, we will talk about that. That's a good question. But I want to make sure you're using the right words. Do you like psychology?
I do like psychology.
Okay, that's good enough. How about over here? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
How to be more prepared.
How to be more prepared.
As far as like doing the job.
What do you need to do to get in the workplace? Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, I don't have, is there a name in front of your thing?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no, that's all right. Just put it, okay. Josh?
I want to know what I can do in a master's program that will improve my chances for a doctorate.
So you're anticipating going on for a master's degree, right? With eventual step to a PhD? Okay. Okay. Over here? No questions on this side. You can just go right now in it. You'll be just perfectly happy. Thank you, Danielle.
So going into the job force, like how can I stand out in crowd?
How can you stand out? That's a pretty good question. Since it's still going to be competitive, still don't have a lot of jobs, so it's getting better. This group back here just really not worried about anything. You're going to graduate in 4 months, right? You are going to have to work. Your mom and dad might not let you in on the secret, but you do have to work. Okay. So it's up to me to fill in the blanks. Let me ask you a question. How easy is it transition from college to work? And this is when I graduated from college. It was a long time ago, folks. Most of you were not even thought of at that time, but some of you might be. But anyway, it was a long time ago. And it was really easy for me to transition from the left side of this picture in college with my friends into the world of work. And this picture would have been good up until about the late part of the 1980s. Essentially, when I graduated from college as an undergraduate, I could just walk, kind of stretch myself across, and I didn't have to know anything about the world of work. I didn't have to have any work experiences. All I had to have was a good education, and then my first job would last 4 or 5 years, actually 5 years on average at that time, and I'd learn about the world of work. I'd learn what skills I was going to have. I'd learn how to apply what I learned in college, and I'd have 5 years to figure it all out, and I'd be trained while I was at it. Okay, and then you can see at the far right, it starts to go up, and then your career would take off. Now, if you were in engineering or, we didn't have computer science at that time like it is today, but engineering would be a big one, accounting. Your career might start a little sooner because you're very specifically oriented, and their career started taking off very fast. Things changed, and now when you enter the workplace, it looks like this. And actually, you have to kind of distort this picture to what it really, really looks like. In essence, what it is, when you jump off the stage come May or June when you graduate here, you're in free fall. It's just the way it is. It's a whole different world out there. And in fact, when you jump to the other side, you're not quite sure how you're going to land. And in this economy, it's kind of like landing on shale. It's slippery. You don't know if you're going to get footing. And I don't care if you're an engineer or a psych major, art history. Well, philosophy majors can go and be bartenders. They do a good job at that, so they may have jobs. Okay? But there's another twist here that makes this really hard. Actually, you should be jumping the other way. Because what's happened in the workplace is, not only is it hard landing, it's moving away faster. The right's moving away from the left-hand side. And the fact is, you actually have to jump up. Okay? Because employers' expectations are so very, very high about what you can do and the fact that you have to start so fast. So if you're in a major that doesn't have a good connection to a job like psychology, there's no job out there that really says psychology. I mean, we have psychologists in advanced training, but not like an engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer. There's a job that says civil electrical engineer. Those people at least don't have to jump quite as far. They have issues. They come up 3 or 4 years, 5 years, 6 years after they graduate. But for people in fields like psychology that don't have really direct connects, it's you really have a long jump. It's hard. And this is what's happening out there. And unfortunately, that's what I preach to faculty. They don't understand this. They think it's like when the picture on the left, when they graduate, there's not much to worry about. Okay, so it's scary, right? It is scary. And there's nothing I can do to reduce that other than to tell you that there's going to be there will be opportunities out there. Right now there's not as many, but they're growing. But what you're going to do is essentially create your own job in the future. I guarantee it for anybody that's here, that's in the age range from, and they're still in their 20s, I would say by the time you're 40, you'll be making and defining your own job. It's just the way that it's going. And I'm going to explain that a little bit later. Okay? So one of the things that you have to look at is, what do employers want? And then how do I get what they want? And what do I need to look like when I come out the other side? Now, there's a lot of things about psychology that are assets in this new economy. Now, how many of you are going to go on and get a master's and kind of go into counseling? Okay, how many, just keep your hands up. How many of you expect to work in the school district? Keep your hands up. Okay, that's going to, now, just to answer your question, that's going to be, depends on where you are. It depends on how states look at funding K-12, which is dismal right now. It doesn't mean that we don't need more counselors at K-12. It's just that it's been very difficult. That you got to stick with it. You got to wait it out. You may not be able to stay where your preferred location is, depending on where the jobs are. And it would be good if you spoke Spanish, to be truthful. In fact, almost everybody in here should have a second language, and Spanish is one that will be important. For the rest of you going into counseling, that market is softer, and it depends, again, on where you choose to live, because most of those are going to be government-supported at some level, or nonprofit. Nonprofits are a little stronger, but the government's finances are kind of weak, and so they're cutting out assistance programs. So that leaves, so you're going to have to dance with that if that's what you really want to do, or create ways that you can take those skill sets and apply them in different situations. So that leaves the rest of you. What are you going to do? What do you think psychologists do? What? Research. What else do what kind of research? What kind of research do you think what is it, since you've been bright, Annie, you're on a roll this morning, as a psychologist, what have you studied of individuals? Not all humans. That's sociology and groups. Okay, so you're supposed to study the behavior, and you could study ecological psych, which is, or you could study it from a social psych perspective, or a developmental, or an abnormal, but you've been able to study people and how they reacted in different situations, how in all these intervening variables like intelligence and attitudes affect how they make choices, right? So who wants you to do research? Well, that's a good answer because, yeah, lots of people. But what kind of people?
Government.
Government, maybe. Who said that? Yes, ma'am. Why would companies want to hire you to?
Well, like for marketing is one side, and then the employees is the other side.
So if you could be in human resources and look at employee job satisfaction and all those kind of things, but you're really right on the other side is the marketing, the branding, how product perception, product use, reaction to advertising, right? Polling, social science research units out polling what people feel about public policy, okay? And how people react to things like healthcare reform or whatever the issue of the day is, right? Okay, so here are the basic, this is what Michigan State, this is based on work we've done, and Michigan State's Board of Trustees has adopted these. We believe these are the 12 core essential skills beyond the major, mastery of your major, which is psychology, that you need to be able to begin to demonstrate in order to make that jump from the left to the right. Now, you don't have to write these all down because they're available for you to download on this website. Just write it down. It's careernetwork.msu.edu and look under Resources Guide. And I don't think there's any, I don't care what anybody wants to do in here, these are going to be critical. Okay? So, does anybody have any question what any of these might mean if you haven't seen these terms? Because these are a way that employers describe things. Yes, sir.
What do you mean by navigating across boundaries?
What do you think navigating across boundary? Now, anybody in IO Psych here, organizational behavior, should know this. Organizational boundary spanning. Anybody talked about boundary spanning in any of your classes? Boundary spanners are individuals that can facilitate crossing boundaries within organizations, outside organizations, between, and outside it can mean between clients. It can be between suppliers to your business. It could be other people in the same industry to cooperate on innovation and exchange of information. So it's collaboration among others. And this has become huge because in organizations up until the late 1990s, everything was siloed away. So you'd have engineering, you'd have the people making ideas, they'd come up with a great, boombox, and then they'd pass it over to development to develop it, then they'd pass it over to marketing, and the marketing would find out that nobody wants to buy it. Happens in the auto industry. And you wonder why the auto industry went down. That's what they did all the time. And now they've broken all that down, and they all work as teams. So you have to know how to navigate across these different units. Finance gets in there, all of it. And now you're not only talking to somebody in the United States. You maybe have a part of your design team in Europe, part of a design team in China. You may have to do cross-cultural boundary spanning. So that's what crossing a boundary means. Okay? Let me pick another one up there. Let's see. Working effectively in a team. How many of you had team projects in college? I bet you probably have 7 a semester, right? I did a study once of how many team projects faculty assigned. It was as freshmen, you were getting 2 or 3. By the time you're seniors, 7. Do you think those team projects you were on reflect the kind of teamwork that goes on in the world of work? You really? Well, in what ways? Oh, I have somebody here. Annie, just hold on. You'll have another chance. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you may not have as much. You may also in the workplace also have the social slacker that their share. And you might have disagreements on how things should be done, and you have to work to balance that.
Yeah.
So I think some of the actual psychological dynamics between this classroom and workforce might be similar.
Okay. Tell me, somebody want to describe, on this side of the class, you guys have been way too quiet over here. You are not going to get a free lunch. Tell me what your most recent team, any of you went on a team project. What happened? I'm the faculty. I assign you guys a team. What did you first thing you did? You picked a leader. Then what did you do? You divided up the work. And then what did you do? Yeah. And then you all came together and put it together, and somebody had to give a presentation, right? Do you think you designed team? What kind of teamwork did you just describe to me? Do you think? Anybody? Is that what we're talking about here? You think it looks the same, kind of in place. But we're talking about a very different thing. In the world of work, teamwork is all about collaboration. Again, that word comes up, the big C word. It means that when you get together, you don't address the problem for who's in the group, what assets do they bring, what strengths do we have, what weaknesses. The team leader doesn't get there to override the thing. He or she is picked to find support to fill in the gaps. Then you look at the problem and how they're going to link this together. It's collaborative. What we do in college, and believe me, I know this because I was terrible at assigning. I thought, team projects, cool, I'll assign them in my class, and I refereed more because some people didn't show up, and some people want to do it my way so I can get an A, and the other people didn't want to do it that way. You've all been there, right? What you're describing to me is not collaboration, but coordination, okay? You coordinated different activities. You all went off and did what you were assigned to do without collaborating with anybody, came back together and hoped that whoever you assigned to put the PowerPoint together so the faculty member would give you an A could put it together. And if whatever piece was missing because of slacker, somebody had to spend all night filling it in, right? Come on. That's pretty racket, right? Well, that doesn't work in the workplace. First place, if you're a slacker, you're gone. Second place, you critique each other in the workplace. That doesn't work too well by the rules of the university. You really can't give the grade to the person next to you. I'm the only one that can give the grade. And then I have to intervene. That's not true in the workplace. The team is the team, and they collaborate. And if people don't collaborate, there's penalties. So you got to think about what these skills mean. This is all good. But what's happened now is that we've seen a set of skills now emerge out of all these skills. So these are uber skills, that's a good German word, but they are super skills. Now employers are really, really focusing on these. Some of these are not vocational. Faculty have to understand this. These are not vocational skills. This is what I'm supposed to do every single day. And now we're asking bachelor students to do what essentially PhDs did 10 years ago. That's how fast it's gone. Believe me, we've known this is coming. So the most important thing that you have to realize that you have to show in any employer to make that is being able to take the initiative. That is the holy grail of all competencies that you can demonstrate. And I hate to say this, but this is not an environment that does an overwhelming job of providing you the initiative to figure a lot of stuff out on your own, because then you challenge me because, you may think of something different than the way I do. And last thing, anybody that's invested all this time to get this fancy PhD and all this stuff doesn't want to be told by somebody that's 18 or 19 or 20. I think Shakespeare is different than the way you think about it. And I have been in many classrooms where the faculty won't even entertain an alternative idea and let you take the initiative. But that's every day in the workplace. Number 2 most important skill, you will not believe this, but it's building and sustaining professional relationships. Now, older employers like me, that in professional relationships were all in a little Rolodex. I found mine not too long ago in my garage, and I took it to school, and I said, in 1992, when we got the emails for the first time, this was my social capital. It was in a Rolodex. I called him, and it wasn't until much later that email was sophisticated enough to even replace that. But in your lifetime, who's ever heard of a Rolodex? Who's ever heard of a telephone? Oh, I mean, it's not, what you have in your pocket is not a telephone. It's a very different kind of device. But employers are expecting you to build social capital, not just a network of Facebook friends, but professional capital from the day you start college. From the people you go to school with that you can tap into later in forms of networks, from the professionals like myself that you meet as guest speakers, as being able to get out and meet alumni, as able to, every time you run into people through activities, you continue to build a network of people that you can find out information from. You also have to reciprocate with information. It's a two-way street, but they want you to bring that with you. One of the groups of students I find greatly underutilized this is students that go on study abroad, particularly ones that are immersed in other countries. How many go on study abroad? Or thinking about study abroad? Oh, this is senior, so you've had your chance. Again, it's a good way to, particularly with your own students is from other countries, is to mix because you can build the foundation for building professional links in other countries that companies may want to do business or have business in, so they have you that has knowledge about how to make contacts, how to operate. This may not even relate to business, but how to culturally work in that country. So there's all ways to build professional relations. Now we're going to come to the most important thing that I think psychology majors don't understand about their major. Because I have Michigan State psychology is the second, third largest major on campus. We graduate 700 psychology majors a year. What do you think your most important, Annie, you've already said this, but what do you think in the basic, second most important skill, other than how people behave, because that's what you study, is in psychology? Go ahead.
How to deal with other people.
Well, that's what I mean. You're talking about a counseling situation, probably, but understanding how people and the dynamics of interpersonal relationships and things like that. What I really want, just beyond that, what's the second most? You've got to have this skill. And most of my psychology students at Michigan avoid it like the plague. Yes, ma'am. No. Well, we're going to get to that in just a minute. But you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But we have to get one more skill set in there before you can do that.
Was it research?
Well, okay, what's the foundation of research? Okay, but what do you do with data? Huh? You have to gather it. So your statistical classes are critical. Our students get by with the minimum, which is 1. You can't make it with 1 statistics class. How many methods classes do you have to take? Probably 1. You better take more than that. And if you can't find them in psych, you better take them in another field. Because it's all about managing, collecting, managing, sorting, analyzing, and taking data and translating it into information. Third most important skill every major has to, but that's the biggest asset you bring and the biggest deficit you bring. Because most of us in psych want to avoid the math classes, don't like the statistics classes, don't understand the methods classes because the faculty make them so boring. But it is really exciting to do research, especially when I do research about people and I can do applied research. Theory research, I could care less about. Well, I don't tell my faculty friends that because you have to ground it in theory, but I really, really don't. I'm more worried about solving your problem today to have you get somewhere you want to go. And that's the kind of things you do, but you come as a deficit because you cheated yourself on stats, you've cheated yourself on methods, you haven't got involved in doing research, and there's a lot of ways to do it because you've got to be able to manage a project. You don't have your name up there, do you? You're going to make me guess?
Yes.
Vanessa. No. Amber. Okay, boy, was I at the other end of the alphabet. Okay, so Amber says, manage project. That's the one red up there because it's new. Do you know what's going to happen to you when you go into, you're going to come into my research unit, and I say, look, we've hired Amber. You're really bright. Okay, we've got an invitation to think about going and doing a study in this area. We don't know anything about it. You've got your professional network. You know how to use the internet. You've got statistical skills, so you know how to pull information off and figure out where everything's. You go figure it out and tell us what to do. You are, what, 23 years old? 24. But you look 23. What a deal. No, I'm just kidding. So you're 24 years old. You've been sitting in my class with a 15-page syllabus for the last 4 years. In every class you took. What day is the test going to be on? What's going to be on the test? Do I really have to read that chapter, right? Come on, you know. And all of a sudden, they're going to say it's all up to you. Particularly the psychology majors. Engineers don't get that risk because, nobody wants the bridge to fall down over here, But you're going to be handed something. Do it. There's no syllabus. There's no course. But you may have a mentor you can go to and ask questions and coworkers you can ask questions to. But it's all up to you. You write the syllabus. It's amazing at 22 and 23, 24 that they're going to let you do that. But that's what they're asking you to do. Then you've got to communicate. So up here in the corner, communication. This is not just communicating by writing. But I will tell you, your first impression you will make in any organization how well you write. Do not underestimate it. And it's not a smiley face on a text message. It isn't going to work. Even though there's a lot of that going on, business etiquette and business writing is critically important. So let me tell you about a team. So maybe you're not the one that's going to get on this first team, but you're pulled together, and I'm sitting there, and I get this message that I've been assigned to work on a team, and Sonia's the head of this team. Well, I never met Sonia in my organization, but boy, I saw this thing that she wrote about 3 months back, and it was absolutely terrible. I don't want to work with her if she can't write very effectively. She doesn't outline her argument very well. And then, of course, when you get to the meeting and she's leading the meeting, yeah, Sonia's the right person, but she's already set most of this team back 5 paces because they're a little leery of her because the way they met her was through her writing. Second thing is your oral communication. I know it sends fear and trembling, but just think of it as kindergarten. You love show and tell in kindergarten. You didn't you? Come on. You love show and tell. It's the same thing. Be passionate about what you are, and then you have to justify and persuade. You have to persuade. You have to justify why you came up with that plan that Amber's come up with. Hey, she has to get up and justify it. And then she's got to persuade the rest of us to go along with it. Then you have managing the project, creating new knowledge. You would think, why? I just want to do a job. Why am I responsible? But from the day one, new knowledge means new ways to do services. So if you're in counseling, what's some new methods that we could be more effective? Maybe by changing the environment, by changing the location. Not changing necessarily the theory, but maybe how we interact with young kids at risk. Maybe we're not getting good results. And you can say, maybe if we did it this way and come up with a way to use our knowledge differently. So it's simple. And it sounds simple, but this is hard, and it takes guts. You got to show initiative. You got to take some risk because you're going to lay it out there. You're going to tell a whole bunch of people that they've done this since God created this organization, and you're going to say, based on what I see, maybe if we did it this way, we would get a better result at the end. Really hard to do. Global understanding depends on the kind of organization, and even isolated in Boise, Idaho, where nobody can find you on a map. Of course, anybody east of the Rocky Mountains can't find you on a map. I tell my students I'm going to Boise, Idaho, and say, where? And I said, you'll know well enough come September where they're from. But, just don't play us in basketball, then you'll be safe. Okay. But global understanding is becoming important. And it's important right here in Boise. Because I know most of you want to stay in Boise. Your president's bought my time, so I'm out here 3 months a year for a couple of years, so I do know most of you want to stay in Boise. But I guarantee a lot of these companies you work for have connections in China and Europe and things, and you may never live in Boise, but you're going to have to be multicultural competent. And so then we'll come to the others. So those are the kind of skills. So how do you get the practice in doing that? How do you get the practice in doing that? What did I do with the page turn? What do you need to do? Oh, well, I'll come back. Well, what do you think you need to do? Yes, sir.
Expose yourself to those types of situations?
Not just expose yourself. You got to immerse yourself in those kind of situations. This is not just go and view the day and step back. You've got to immerse. So if you're in counseling, you've got to do as much counseling. Now, my youngest daughter was in psych. Heaven forbid. No, She loved psych because that's what she thought she wanted to do. I told her, she's the most like me, and I told her she was really good in the sciences. She'd be an undergraduate chemistry major, but no, she had then had to go to a counselor in high school, and she thought that's what she wanted to be, and then she graduated, and she found out she absolutely hated it. So we couldn't back into being a doctor, which she really should have gone into, because that's, so she did. She came back and went into nursing. She finally listened to me, so I did some tests, and nursing research came out at the top. And you know what? Now she's a nurse. She did it herself. I'm very proud of her. And you know what's made her stand out among all her peers? Psychology, and she was in crisis counseling, so she had heavy training. And though she didn't like it where it went, she's used it every day, and now she has very high responsibility and high risk wards, suicide things and like that, and particularly with young people her own age, because she can talk to them. She never thought she would use it again. But again, she only understood that by getting immersed in it and doing it every single day. Counselors do this different. Volunteer in the schools. Volunteer at nonprofits. Get as much as you can. If you're not in that, then you're going to have to get involved. Find places that you can use the skills that you're developing. Find out if there are faculty that are doing applied research that you can be on a research project. I tell my students in my classes the number one thing is to be proactive and take the initiative. I have had students just simply go and email their faculty, whether it's in science or saying, look, I'm at the end of my, and I know this is late for you guys, but you can get the idea. I'm at the end of my sophomore year. I'm coming back. I'd like to be involved in research. I want to know if you have any ongoing research projects that I can start out as a volunteer, because most of us don't plan that far ahead to incorporate you in the loans. But once you start, then the next year's grants, we can incorporate you into research money. And every student that I had that done that have been very, very, and found faculty that wanted to work with them. And they've gone on not necessarily to academic careers, but they've gone on to very different careers that they thought of because they had that exposure. Then you need internships. The bottom line is internships. And I'll get to that in a minute. I probably put this out of order, but let me go to internships and I'll come back into this, because I think I'll end on this. You're going to have to tell me my time. Okay, so I'm going to emphasize internships because the number one strategy that employers use to find new talent is through internships. Now, I just did this morning on campus to a group. I will tell you, out west of the Rocky Mountains, that internship penetration by employers who are using internships is only about 45%. When you come to my neck of the woods, it's 77%. So that mindset in my part of the world, everywhere east of the Great Meridian, runs east and west, eastern part of the U.S., heavily vested into internships. Not as much as you need out here in the western part of the U.S. But this is the most important thing you're going to do. The second most important strategy they use is they use alumni from the campuses they target recruiting at. So the second most valuable resource that any of you have is being a Bronco. Yep.
Question about the internships. So when you're talking about internships, like we have internships that are here at Boise State, are you talking about like out in the job field where we're...
Okay. Give me an example of one that you would have at Boise State.
So peer advising.
Okay. So in counseling, if you're in counseling, peer advising is a great place to start. But then you've got to change the context, because this context is set up different than if you get at high-risk kids in the juvenile court system, or you're doing at-risk kids in a middle school. The environment's different, the controls and settings are different. So you have to learn how to navigate that. So just going out with peer advising in itself is going to kind of limit you. But if you go out with a couple of those, they don't all have to be internships, but you've got a professional experience like that and build on it and show that I can operate in different environments, that's good. Okay? Internships I'm talking about are mostly offered by companies, corporations, organizations. Let's not get into paid and unpaid and that. You're going to run into more unpaid than paid. And I hate unpaid. and I'm kind of the national guru on internships, and I'm trying to do something about it, but it's not going to be resolved anytime soon. Even if you're going to choose to do an internship after you graduate, which is unfortunately happens but necessary. Okay? Let me see if this, social media is big, again, more on the East Coast than the West Coast, but again, making connections, using your social media and connections to say, I'm available. These are the things I can bring to your company. Do you know anybody that, you can introduce me to that can do that? Now, again, I pick on my youngest daughter because she's my youngest daughter, but so she got her nursing degree and she came home and said, Dad, I absolutely have to go to Florida. That's where I want to do. I said, okay, but if you're going to go to Florida, you're going to do your homework. Where are you going to go, and what systems, and I want to give you some systems to tap into. So she graduated, and then she graduated in the building where our alumni, the head of alumni was a career services good friend of mine. He put her right in the LinkedIn, gave her 5 names of key MSU alumni in the health field in Tampa. And then I called my really close, I have a network of people in Florida, and one of them is at the University of Tampa, and he gave her a network. She went down there and met some people. Okay. It wasn't, she had to pass her national certification before she could get a job. And then nobody would hire her until she got her in the health field, and the economy in Florida sucks. It's even worse than Michigan. So she was stuck. She was in limbo, and she was running out of money. So she calls me, and she says, Dad, should I come home? I don't want to. I said, it's not a failure, but if you're running out of money, there's nothing worse to get trapped down there and then can't get home. You still haven't found a job. If it breaks for you, you still got money. You can go back down there. You haven't burnt any bridges. All I say is the minute you leave, you put out in your LinkedIn and your Facebook that for reasons you're coming home, and if anybody hears of anything. Well, one of her friends that she went to high school with, she hadn't heard for years, picked it up on Facebook, and she was head of nursing recruiting at a hospital in Livonia. And she had an interview. She was the only new nurse that had an interview without a certificate, and she was hired the day after she had her certificate. It works if you're honest and you stay with it. So social media is getting big and bigger. Okay, what counts to employers? This is not going to make some of you very, very happy. Anything that I tell you about the events that you participate in college that I value very, very highly, sometimes don't make sense to an employer. Anything that you do can leverage you to get a job. It's how you package it and convey what you did to employers. Now, as these circles start, they get bigger and bigger. As they get bigger, they're what employers look at closely and when they evaluate you for employment. So the first thing is the smallest circle is study abroad. Now, I know you don't have a big study abroad program, but you've got to imagine Michigan State is the leading public institution in studying students abroad. That is our big thing. Unfortunately, they came to me late and said they had sold it, that employers would literally love it because we're a global economy. Employers haven't bought it. And so we've developed figured out, and we unpack it now because students could come back and tell me what they did academically. They could tell about the pub crawl in Dublin and things like that. And I've led study abroad, so I know about the pub crawls in Dublin. So believe me, it's a little harder in Tokyo, except they put all their beer in machines, so it's and whiskey, so it's a little different. But anyway, the problem is by the time when the students we found were conveying it, they were talking about academic tourism. They were just talking about having a good time. They didn't tell them about any of the skills they got out of the business. And then we go to the next one, and this is one university is important to us, is you engaging in civic responsibility. And there's not a company out there that's not socially responsible. The problem is, what did you get out of that developed the skills that we talked about that you can convey to me as an employer in my context? Okay. The next one is leadership. We are big on leadership. We want to develop you all as leaders. But they tend to downplay leadership in non-professional organizations, the ski club. I'm trying to think of the clubs that were set up the other night when I went through the union. But you have all these clubs, and you could be an officer in that, but it doesn't resonate as strongly. Sure, you have leadership skills. They're going to give you a little credit for that. but it doesn't because it's missing one important ingredient. We'll see that in a minute. Scholarly research with faculty. Now, I know my faculty friends will die on this. There are companies out there that if you're doing scholarly research with a faculty member that applies to their company, then it's great. But if it doesn't, and you say you did scholarly research, then they say, okay, take it apart and tell me how it benefits me. Because, you know, that research doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and we'll never use it. So what did you do that I can do here? It gets better, just a minute. Okay, then the next one is international internships. Now, we're pushing international internships really big. Again, employers don't give more credit to it because it is an internship part. But if Chrissy and I are both doing an internship, and she's doing it in Stuttgart, and I'm doing it here in Boise, and it's exactly the same kind of work, and that Sean is interviewing us, and we find out we're both equivalent in what we got out of the internship part, then she turns to Chrissy and say, okay, what makes it different from being in Stuttgart than here? What did you learn that helps my company? And if you haven't thought about it, and it turns into another academic tourism or pub crawl, it gets, you know, devalued because of the setting, that you haven't made sense of the setting. Okay, now we get into the big three. Faculty supervised consulting and applied research that takes place in the community. Perfect for psych. Perfect. You know, and my students do this because they're out working with employers on employer issues. A lot of this is publishable. I'm hoping schools like Boise State will reward faculty for doing this. It may or may not work. At our school, it doesn't work. But this is critical. It's publishable. But why? Because you're out in their environment, looking at their problems, doing research that makes sense to them. And even if I'm doing it with, is it an A? Sina? And then I transfer over to John, it makes sense to John what I did with you because he understands the context we did it in. Next one that's most important is being leadership in a professional organization. Why a professional organization? Because if, you know, Sadie and these other people are sitting there as leaders in a professional organization, they deal with what they do is they get to see professional behaviors, professional dress, professional demeanor, professional ways to do things, and then it immediately gives them an advantage in the workplace because you can start faster if you don't have to learn the etiquette, protocols, and things like that. And then that leaves the absolute biggest one is still internships or professional practice. So counselors is practicum, it may be clinicals and things like that, but it's professional practice because that's what they identify with. They're familiar with it. They know the outcomes of it. They want to hear it framed for them. Okay, so no matter what you involve in, you have to be involved in that. So let me go back, and I told you at the beginning that you're going to create your own jobs. I do have some work where I'm doing with IBM, and it's called the T Professional. Now, the tragedy of what people external to the university view, particularly psych, is they're generalists. They can't do anything. So they're like this. And maybe you have a little nub of mastery like this. Okay, so they miss the point. Because what we produce in the university, believe it or not, is eyes. In depth and one knowledge. Nobody better than that than engineering and accounting. Oh, they're boring people. Okay. But IBM found that those eyes don't work well in this new economy. And guess what? 35% of all IBM employees are not engineers, not computer science. They are social scientists because they work in systems. And in systems, you need social scientists. So they have anthropologists. They have sociologists. They have psychologists. So what does it mean is, and why you are good, what you have to offer, if you think about this, it's not perfect yet. It's growing. You're like a fruit tree. It's budding. You're deep in one discipline. You know psychology. You know the analytical thinking and problem-solving techniques of psychology. Then, if you pick the system, now they have 13 urban systems. It could be like world food, it could be water, it could be transportation, health, education, finance, retail, whatever you want to get into, how you fit in, and they want you to pick a problem to solve. that system thing is the IBM way of thinking. But the most important thing is when you figure out where you want to go, look at the other disciplines that feed in. So you just shouldn't be a psychologist. You should say, okay, I'm interested in counseling and psych and what's going on in neuroscience, so maybe I should have biology as courses in biology, so I know enough about the mind to go along with my psychology. Or maybe I need to have economics. Or maybe I need to, and this doesn't mean you need to have enough so you can understand and communicate with those people. Because when you get in the world of work, it's about collaboration, so you're going to meet them. And your asset is being interdisciplinary trained with your psychology. And that doesn't necessarily mean another social science degree. In our school, our psychologists take soc and things, and they stay within the College of Social Science. I need them to get in the sciences. I need them to get in actually some heavy communication courses, which is in a different college. Economics is the College of Social Science at our school, but it's sometimes the College of Business. Don't be afraid of the sciences. Everything in psychology is moving heavily interfaced with the sciences now. I mean, everything, neuroscience, more and more we learn about the brain, and then you have to know chemistry, you have to know psychology. You go into neuroscience departments, and Michigan State has a very large one. They all have degrees in science and psychology. Animal science, physiology, chemistry, but they almost all started in psychology and have at least one advanced degree in psychology. That's just the way the world's going. Then looking across the top are all those skills I told you about. Your asset right now, believe it or not, is at the top. That's the general part. That's the boundary spanning part. That's your asset now. What you have to prove to employers is your depth, because unlike engineers that can go out and do something right now with their depth, they're not sure what you can do yet. And then there's that me right in the middle. What does that mean? That means you. There's a difference between pushing your outer edges and pushing your inner edges. Outer edges means I learn more my technique and I learn more about how to do statistics better, or I learn how to do research better. Engineers learn how to do engineering better. So we push our outer edges because that's visible everything, and if we're really good at that, people are going to notice. And we often in the world ignore the inner edges of who we are and feel comfortable while we are, that we know we can make decisions about ourselves, we can handle conflict and things as we push these boundaries, because when you're a T, it's up to you. I's get very dependent on somebody else making career decisions for them. If you're going to be a T, and it's like it's all up to you. So the better you push your inner boundaries on who you are, what you value, the systems you want to work in, and set priorities, the better off you're going to be. Okay? So this is where we're going. Now, when I told you you're going to start your own job, here's how this is working. Once you master a system, then you begin to learn another system. It takes time to master a system, then you learn another system. They overlap. So food overlaps with water. Food overlaps with health. They almost all overlap in some way. Then you have interdisciplinary knowledge, and as you continue to mature, and you don't never stop learning, because one of the most critical skills was continuing to learn, right? You expand your need, and then what happens is these overlap. They're found niches where they overlap, where you identify this is going to emerge, and you create your job in that niche. And this is happening right now. It's kind of under the radar, but most of us that have worked in this field a long time think this is really going to be what is going to be the future, and what's going to happen. It's going to happen in your lifetime. It's certainly going to I just know it's going to happen in your lifetime. So the more comfortable you are with me being able to take the risk to move into niches, the better off you are, particularly in psychology. Seize opportunities, see where new things are emerging. You've got the skill sets better. Engineers may on the surface sound, and even computer science, they don't like to take risks. Okay? Those that are going in the health field, risk is defined different. You do take risks, but it's defined and the consequences are different. So let me be careful about risk-taking in general. It depends on what setting you're in. But so you're going to, I'm laying out something that you may be futuristic to most of you, but again, it's going to be up to you. You've been given a platform to play on, and it's up to you how you play. So one of the common questions I get is, do we do what we're passionate about? You heard that? Do what you're passionate about. Do what you love to do, right? How many, if you heard that? You've heard that since you were a teeny weeny baby. That's what your mom and dad tell you. But then they really do want you to be, oh, you're a psychology major. How are you going to make a living? You really should have been an accountant. Because you got a guaranteed $45,000 a year income and you can pay off your student loans. But you hate it. Okay. Let me tell you something about passion. We use it as a cliche, but I really believe in it. It's number 2 strategy for surviving in a fast economy. You've got to be passionate about what you want to do. The problem with passion is you're sitting there, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm passionate about. You might have some nibbles here and there. Okay, here's how it works. Bless the soul of somebody that's 18 that knows what their passion is. And there's a few of them. Okay, there are a few of them. But passion takes time. It takes you have to weave together a foundation. Passion can't stand just on its own. It has to have a foundation. So it means you have to weave together educational and knowledge. You have to weave together experiences. You have to try different things. And when your passion is ready to emerge and feels that you can support it, it will emerge. Now, I did all the right things. I did all the things that Mom and Dad wanted me to do. I was dutiful. I was into education. And I started as an economist, and I hated it. I wanted to be a teacher. I wasn't really good at that, but I a teacher because until I fell into this job, true story, I was not going to do this job. I was in University of California. I took a job back in my home state of Washington. I grew up up here outside of Spokane, and I got a job at a state university, and I was all excited about it. And I thought this would be the kind of job I wanted. And I was good at research, but I just couldn't handle the University of California. And the day I was moving, I had sold my house. The moving van I was going to self-move. And they called me and they had to renege on the offer because the governor didn't get a sales tax increase in it. So he lined item all the new positions at the state universities. And I was going to a state university. So I had to backtrack and not knowing what in the heck I did. Sold my house. I had to leave. I got to Southern California. And then I hadn't left a week, and the people backed out of the house. But I went back to Michigan State because my wife, Dad, was head of the urban planning department. It does do well to marry into faculty sometimes. Anyway, and so we had some consulting together, so I had enough to keep me open. And I was thinking about what am I going to do? The labor market in academics was terrible, and even with the publication I had, I didn't know if I wanted to do it. And so somebody said, well, you need to go talk to so-and-so. They just got some money, and they might have some way to start. So I walked in. I'd never been in a career service office in my life, folks. And undergraduate, I didn't go. In graduate school, I didn't go. So I found the career service at Michigan State. So I went in and sat down, and they said, they'd just gotten some money to start this institute on studying the transition and where college graduates went in Michigan. Because back in 1982, we were coming out of a recession, and we thought we were going to replace the auto industry. Boy, just the auto industry just makes such good sex that they couldn't get out of bed with it, and then the whole thing fell apart later, and Michigan has paid for it. But I said, okay, they offered me this job. I had done very little labor economics, so I knew about labor economics. I didn't have any career development theory. I knew nothing about this, and they offered me this job to run this institute. I said, okay, I'll stay 2 years because I wanted to learn more about social science, survey design and stuff. 30 years later, I'm still there because it's the most exciting thing I've ever done. And so I was in my mid-40s before this all came to. If I hadn't gone to California and done into rigorous research to know how it worked, if I hadn't got into having to stand up before and advocate policy changes, I wouldn't know how it worked. If I hadn't had to deal with failure, I wouldn't, because I needed all that. Then it just emerged. And then I was coming back on a plane from the West Coast, and I was sitting next to this woman who was an engineer for General Motors, and she asked me what I did, and I was telling her, and I said, I'm really thinking about leaving. This isn't what I got into this to do. And she looked at me, and she says, you you got a unique job. You're really passionate about it. You better step back and think about that. And from that minute on, my passion came out. This is what I'm really excited about. The university could have retired me by now, and I told them I'm staying on because they're not going to replace me. So it's not that I'm vain or anything, but if I step back, then there's nobody advocating for you. And your Professor Lundrum knows this, that there's very few of my types out there on a continual basis working for you to understand what's going on. They're working for the employers, and they're working for the faculty, but they're not working for you. And so I'm not willing. So is it going to pay off? It's going to pay off, but you have to figure out where you want to go. You have to get the experiences. You have to stick with it. You may take a beating, and the sad thing is a lot of you have student debt, and when you're not making a lot of money, it makes it tough. And 15 years ago, we didn't have to worry about student debt, but now it's just totally out of line where the salaries are. Yet. It's compelling whether you should go to. We won't get on whether you should go to. People should go to college. You already made that decision. You're here, but it does. And so then that gets me to your question in the back. Should you go to graduate school? Right? Okay. Going to graduate school has never solved the labor market problem. Never, ever, ever, and it never, ever will. Having said that, there's right times to go to graduate school and there's wrong times to go to graduate school. If, in fact, your next step in the career you've planned for and you're committed to requires you to go on and get a master's in counseling, in social work, do that. You have to. You have to have the credentials. If you have planned to go to become a PhD and you have the grades and the research experience and you've planned, not in your senior year, but maybe early in your junior year, maybe getting inklings in your sophomore, and you made plans for it, then you need to continue that commitment. Because you made a conscientious early decision to do that. If you're scrambling right now to say, oops, I'm not sure the labor market's going to work out, I think I better go to grad school, get an MBA, get something in public administration or something like that, not a good choice. Why? Because there's a lot of MBAs out there that are dying for jobs because we got too many of them coming out. You're going to take on increasing loans, not knowing what the outcome is. You're not going to be experience rich. You're going to be book rich, and employers don't pay for the latter. So you're going to be in a bigger hole. I'd rather have you, believe it or not, I'd rather have you take some lumps and figure out the economy first, even if you're not successful in it, before you commit to going to graduate school, so you know why you want to go to graduate school, you know what the outcomes are going to be, and you're willing to pay the price. Let me tell you something about, and particularly graduate school. You have had fun as an undergraduate. There is nothing better. You will never have an experience like it. You've learned a lot, you've been challenged, but it's been fun. I'm going to tell you something about graduate school. It is not fun. It is work. I expect you to work. It is, it's not the football games. It is work. And most of it you have to do on your own, and you have to be self-motivated, because we just expect you to fill in all the gaps. So when you make that commitment, you need to know why you're doing it. And I'm telling you, the biggest problem we have in graduate schools right now is the people dropping out, because they didn't understand that when you come in. The non-completion rates are huge. And the second thing, and you can say this, you can laugh at this if you want, most of you find out you don't want to be like me. Really. I got a great profession. I had to crave it out myself. Maybe somebody else will be able to do that. But, higher ed has its own problems. And if my undergraduate faculty had really told me honestly, I probably would have pursued something else. But now I wouldn't do that. But maybe 30 years ago I would have said that. But, the academy looks cool. It's intellectual, but we're not very nice to each other sometimes. Okay, so you go on to graduate school if you want to go. If you're going to go truly on to PhD, then forget the master's. They don't use the master's as a terminal degree unless you're going for a specific terminal degree in IO or something. That's all you're going to go. If it's PhD you want, you're going to go into a PhD program. The only way you get a master's is if you didn't pass your qualifying exams at that stage for a PhD, and they terminate you with a master's. Yes?
So, as an undergrad, it's easy to kind of do the interdisciplinary
Yeah.
But how do you find master's programs that let you be more interdisciplinary?
Well, that's interesting. Now, I was really lucky. So I went to Whitman College. I was a chemistry major. So I said to myself, I loved organic, but after staying in lab, I didn't want to do lab work. I'm just too much outdoors. So they were telling us what we had to do, so I went to the library, and in those days we didn't have internet, we didn't have computers. So I sat down in the library and all the graduate catalogs, and Michigan State's catalog was yay big. And I said, I'm going to take this one catalog, and if I can't find something in there that I want to do, then I probably shouldn't be going to grad school. But yeah, I did. And bless their souls, they had, at the time, it's kind of been squeezed down, they had an interdisciplinary science, economics that led into what I wanted to, and then I finally became an economist. They're hard to find because when you get to grad schools, we want to make you eyes, eyes, eyes. So you've got to be very diligent. You've got to search and find out places, because there are places that are creating out some pretty creative ways to miss and match. But you have to go to a university that's going to allow you to do that. Remember, you're paying for it. And at the master's level in particular, there's still more flexibility. PhD, you get to create your PhD in a lot of ways. You'll decide what fields you want to concentrate in and what you're supporting fields. And I had a lot of leeway there. It just depends on your faculty and your major advisor. But if you're going to go to a master's and you want to do some interdisciplinary work, psych's a pretty good one. Psych, if you go to the right school, because you can link into economics. You can link. Depending on the school and what kind of research. So you've got a lot of economists doing behavioral economics. I'm kind of a behavioral economist. They didn't know that back when I was in getting paid. But so economics and psychology, growing field. They've got biopsychology, growing field. So if you have a science bent, then you want to go to a program that has people working in biopsych or neuropsych or whatever. So you're going to have to search out people where a faculty member is doing that, and then when you applied and hope you qualify for that, you can qualify because you have to get admitted to the university before you can get admitted to the department. It's not what you think it is. You might get admitted to the department, not admitted to the university. Find the faculty member, write to them, get to know them, say, look, I'm interested in this because I want to link these two majors. What are the opportunities of doing that if I come to University X, Y, or Z? So you have to do some homework. If you have a mentor currently in your psychology program here, I talk to them because they have professional networks at other schools that may say, I know I have a friend at the, University of Utah that is working in that area, and why don't you get in touch? I'll introduce you to him and talk to him. Usually faculty are pretty good about responding, but you're going to have to do your homework. You have to find out what schools are letting them do that. You wouldn't find that too much at my school. Well, you'd really have to make it work. We are so siloed, and we're a major research university. So you got to be where you're going to happy. And remember, the other thing you have to remember about masters is you pay your way. We don't often give a lot of research money directly to masters. It depends on the program. Maybe at Boise State they have a little bit more because you're not. But at our school, first place you wouldn't come to psych to get a master's. We don't offer a master's in psych, but you have to realize that a lot of the times when you do master's-only programs, it's on your money. You may find work when you get there, but there won't be necessary scholarships. There won't be TAs and things like that they'll offer at the PhD level. Yes, sir.
When you guys have done your studies, what have you done with, say, non-traditional students?
Good question. Yes, I do. I do have a big study on non-traditional students. The person that I'm working with, and I haven't got everything published as yet, but you would be interesting to know how much similar non-traditional students are on their outlook. They may have other motivators, but their fears, some of the expectations are very similar. We were astounded how similar they were on some of their expectations than your younger peers. What you bring to non-traditionals bring to the table is a more direct sense of purpose. I can't fiddle away my time because I don't have time to fiddle away. So when you sit in the back of the class and hear some of the stuff that's going on in Bangladesh, you just shake your head and say, tell them to get a life. I'm telling you, that's true. Because older students don't see that. But you have still the same fears of transition because you're trying something new. Particularly if you've been displaced from work and you have to recreate yourself. If you're being sponsored by work and you have a place to go back to, then that fear is reduced. The other thing that you do is and particularly if there's women in your group, you have to handle so many multiple things at the same time. And because you may have family, you may have work, you may have other things you have to deal with that normal 18 to 24-year-old college student doesn't have to worry about. So, but what's interesting is, make a long story short, is some of the issues we talked about are just as relevant to you today as the younger people sitting down here in front of you. Yeah, it depends on how they approach. You got to find employers. Employers will tell us on one hand that they're open for people that are new graduates that are older. But you're not on their radar screen. It's how do you get on their radar screen? You have to work a little extra harder. You have to sell a little harder. You've got some skills perseverance. You've got things that other people might not pick up that you have to emphasize and say, I can really help you. I persevered. I made a life change. I succeeded at this. When I can bring these older, mature skills into the workplace, but you're going to have to convince them because you're not always on their radar screen. They're looking for the 23, 24-year-old that's brand new. They're easy to see and stuff. And you kind of just go by in a blur. That's the negative side. Okay? So that's where you need some coaching. That's where you need to really get in the Career Center and work with the people here. You have a much richer, non-traditional population at Boise State. We don't have that. I don't see many non-traditionals. I mean, I'm working with other schools on this non-traditional study, and because we don't have any. That's just not, they're not welcomed in a way. I mean, we take their money, but it's not welcome in the way you would think. We got 9,000 students. And the thing we're having to deal with now is the veterans thing, this new veterans that we got.